Hi guys. Okay, so I know I'm holding the camera a little funny, but I have to hold it slightly funny so that so that you can hear me. But the reason I'm making this video is because last night I was reading the book of Job. And there's in the Bible that I have, it's a contemporary language Bible. So we can understand it. And there's an intro in the very beginning about suffering. And there's a lot of people that I feel could benefit from hearing this. Um, so bear with me. Um, Hopefully, there's something you can take from it if you hear it. I have a lot of family that suffer from the same disease that I do, the same chronic illness, and it's called hidradenitis suppurativa. And in reading this, I have found many things that we've all said, we've all related to. If I could make a video reading the whole freaking book, I would, but that would take a while. So I'm just gonna read you the intro. And it says, Job suffered. His name is synonymous with suffering. He asked, why? He asked, why me? And he put his questions to God. He asked his questions persistently, passionately, and eloquently. He refused to take silence for an answer. He refused to take cliches for an answer. He refused to let God off the hook. Job did not take his sufferings quietly or piously. He disdained going for a second opinion to outside physicians or philosophers. Job took his stance before God, and there he protested his suffering, protested mightily. It is not only because Job suffered that he is important to us, it is because he suffered in the same ways that we suffer, in the vital areas of family, personal health, and material things. Job is also important to us because he searchingly questioned and boldly protested his suffering. Indeed, he went to the top with his questions. It is not suffering as such that troubles us. It is undeserved suffering. Almost all of us in our years of growing have the experience of disobeying our parents and getting punished for it. When that discipline was connected with wrongdoing, it had a certain sense of justice to it. When we do wrong, we get punished. One of the surprises as we get older, however, is that we come to see that there is no real connection between the amount of wrong we commit and the amount of pain we experience. An even larger surprise is that very often there is something quite the opposite. We do right and get knocked down. We do the best we are capable of doing, and just as we are reaching out to receive our reward, we are hit from the blind side and sent reeling. This is the suffering that first bewilders and then outrages us. This is the suffering that bewildered and outraged Job, for Job was doing everything right when suddenly everything went wrong. And it is this kind of suffering to which Job gives voice when he protests God. Job gives voice to his sufferings as well, so accurately and honestly, that anyone who has ever suffered, which includes every last one of us, can recognize his or her personal pain in the voice of Job. Job says boldly what some of us are too timid to say. He makes poetry out of what in many of us is only a tangle of confused whimpers. He shouts out to God what a lot of us mutter behind our sleeves. He refuses to accept the role of a defeated victim. It is also important to note what Job does not do, lest we expect something from him that he does not intend. Job does not curse God as his wife suggests he should do, getting rid of the problem by getting rid of God, but neither does Job explain suffering. He does not instruct us in how to live so that we can avoid suffering. Suffering is a mystery, and Job comes to respect the mystery. In the course of facing, questioning, and respecting suffering, Job finds himself in an even larger mystery, the mystery of God. Perhaps the great The greatest mystery in suffering is how it can bring a person into the presence of God in a state of worship, full of wonder, love, and praise. Suffering does not inevitably do that, but it does it far more often than we would expect. It certainly did that for Job. Even in his answer to his wife, he speaks the language of an uncharted irony, a dark and difficult kind of truth. We take the good days from God. Why not also the bad days? But there is more to the book of Job than Job. There are Job's friends. The moment we find ourselves in trouble of any kind, sick in the hospital, bereaved by a friend's death, dismissed from a job or relationship, depressed or bewildered, people start showing up telling us exactly what's wrong with us and what we must do to get better. Sufferers attract fixers the way roadkills attract vultures. At first we're impressed that they bother with us and amazed at their facility with answers. They know so much. How did they get to be such experts in living? More often than not, these people use the Word of God frequently and loosely. They are full of spiritual diagnosis and prescription. It all sounds so hopeful, but then we begin to wonder, why is it that for all their apparent compassion we feel worse instead of better after they said their piece? The book of Job is not only a witness to the dignity of suffering and God's presence in our suffering, but it is also our primary biblical protest against religion that has been reduced to explanations or answers. Many of the answers that Job's so-called friends give him are technically true, but it's the technical part that ruins them. They are answers without personal relationship, intellect without intimacy. The answers are slapped onto Job's ravaged life like labels on a specimen bottle. Job rages against the secularized wisdom that has lost touch with the living realities of God. In every generation, there are men and women who pretend to be able to instruct us in a way of life that guarantees that we will be healthy, wealthy, and wise. According to the propaganda of these people, anyone who lives intelligently and morally is exempt from suffering. From their point of view, it is lucky for us that they are now at hand to provide the intelligent and moral answers we need. On behalf of all of us who have been misled by the platitudes of the nice people who show up to tell us everything is going to be just all right if we simply think such and do such and such, Job issues an anguished rejoinder. He rejects the kind advice and teaching that has God all figured out, that provides glib explanations for every circumstance. Job's honest defiance continues to be the best defense against cliches of positive thinkers and the prattle of religious small talk. The honest, innocent Job is placed in a setting of immense suffering and then surrounded by the conventional religious wisdom of the day in the form of speeches by Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu. The contrast is unforgettable. The counselors methodically and pedantically recite their bookish precepts of Job to Job. At first Job rages in pain and roars out his protests, but then he becomes silent in awestruck faith before God, who speaks out from a storm, a whirlwind of deity. Real faith cannot be reduced to spiritual bromides and merchandised in success stories. It is refined in the fires and the storms of pain. The book of Job does not reject answers as such. There is content in biblical religion. It is the secularization of answers that is rejected. Answers severed from their source, the living God, the word that both batters us and heals us. We cannot have truth about God divorced from the mind and heart of God. In our compassion, we don't like to see people suffer, and so our instincts are aimed at preventing and alleviating suffering. No doubt that is a good impulse, but if we really want to reach out to others who are suffering, we should be careful not to be like Job's friends, not to do our helping with the presumption that we can fix things, get rid of them, or make them better. We may look at our suffering friends and imagine how we could have better marriages, better behaved children, better mental and emotional health, but when we rush in to fix suffering, we need to keep in mind several things. First, no matter how insightful we may be, we don't really understand the full nature of our friend's problems. Second, our friends may not want our advice. Third, the ironic fact of the matter is that more often than not, people do not suffer less when they are committed to following God, but more. When these people go through suffering, their lives are often transformed, deepened, marked with beauty and holiness in remarkable ways that could never have been anticipated before the suffering. So instead of continuing to focus on preventing suffering, which we simply won't be very successful at anyway, perhaps we should begin entering the suffering, participating in so far as we are able, entering the mystery and looking around for God. In other words, we need to quit feeling sorry for people who suffer and instead look up to them, learn from them, and if they will let us, join them in protest and prayer. Pity can be nearsighted and condescending. Shared suffering can be dignifying and life-changing. As we look at Job's suffering and praying and worshiping, we see that he has already blazed a trail of courage and integrity for us to follow. But sometimes it's hard to know just how to follow Job's lead when we feel so alone in our suffering, unsure that what God wants us to do. What we must realize during those times of darkness is that the God who appeared to Job in the whirlwind is calling out to all of us. Although God may not appear to us in a vision, he makes himself known to us in all the many ways that he describes to Job, from the macro to the micro, from the wonders of the galaxies to the little things we take for granted. He is the creator of the unfathomable universe all around us, and he is also the creator of the universe inside of us. And so we gain hope, not from the darkness of our suffering, not from the past answers in books, but from the God who sees our suffering and shares our pain. Reading Job prayerfully and meditatively leads us to face the questions that arise when our lives don't turn out the way we expect them to. First, we hear all the stock answers. Then we ask the questions again with variations, and hear the answers again with variations over and over and over. Every time we let Job give voice to our own questions, our suffering gains in dignity, and we are brought a step closer to the threshold of the voice and mystery of God. Every time we persist with Job in rejecting the quick-fix counsel of people who see us and hear us but do not understand us, we deepen our availability and openness to the revelation that comes only out of the tempest. The mystery of God eclipses the darkness and the struggle. We realize that suffering calls our lives into question, not God's. The tables are turned. God, alive, is present to us. God is speaking to us. And so Job's experience is confirmed and repeated once again in our suffering and our vulnerable humanity. That's all of it. Hopefully somebody got something out of it. Maybe it'll inspire you to go read Job. I don't know. But I always found Job to be a good story because he suffers in a lot of the ways that my family suffers. But for the most part, I have learned that HS sufferers, they're not suffering. I mean, physically maybe. But truthfully, they're warriors. They're a lot stronger than, people I've met who don't have HS. They wake up every morning and they face life with this head-on personality. Like, they're going to take on anything and everything. But I just wanted to share it with you, and hopefully you liked it. And hopefully you got something from it, and hopefully you didn't just think that this was all just a bunch of drabble. But anyway, that's all for me. Bye, guys.